Welcome to Product AMA. We started Product AMA to give those passionate or curious about product management a daily break, something to look forward to.
So today our topic is about mentorship for product managers. And I've been involved in this for a long time, but I thought rather than me telling you stories, it would be really interesting to hear from somebody else who's had a lot of experience with it. So joining us to explore this topic today is Rina Whittaker, who is the VP of Product and Design at Tier1 Financial Solutions. Rina, thanks for joining us today and welcome to Product AMA.
Oh, thanks for having me, Lee. I'm excited.
Good, anytime. So I always like to start by finding out a bit about your product management journey. And I understand you did your degree in computer science, so an engineer. And then you became a product analyst at WorkBrain. You were at Eloqua for a while, and then you started to get into senior product management roles at Shomi, Intellytics, and you're now a VP at Tier1. So tell us a little bit about how you got interested in product management originally, and what have been kind of the key decisions or milestones that have led you to where you are today?
Absolutely. I actually happened in on product management. So I did my bachelor's in computer science and had lofty dreams of actually developing software. But I graduated, I'm going to age myself a little bit. I graduated when the bubble burst and found myself competing against people with a ton of experience. So I was at a bit of a crossroads in terms of, if I can't find the career path that I want directly in technology developing, where do I want to take my career? And I kind of played around with a lot of different options, including going back to school. And I ended up in the business at RBC at Royal Bank of Canada. And that's where I kind of learned around about business systems analysts and this translation layer between the people developing and the people using the product. And I really excelled at that. That kind of got my juices flowing. But I knew I wanted to do it for more than one unit of people. And I'd been hearing about this company, WorkBrain. A few people I knew from school and through social circles were there. And so I really just thought, let's try it. It was more of, I know I want to work at a software company. I want to be that translation layer, great, a product analyst position. So it wasn't really until I started in the role of product analyst and took pragmatic marketing courses that I started to really open up to what product management was. And that, I think, is like where the seed was really planted for me. And then I learned, I really went through the whole initiation by fire, thrown into the fire and learn things as best as I could, internally developing with engineers and figuring out how to build new products. But throughout my career, I've had like these pivotal moments where I questioned, do I still want to do product? So I knew right away I fell in love with product management at WorkBrain and really enjoyed the concept. It kind of solidified even more as I got to Eloqua and started looking at the full 360 view, being more focused externally on the outward facing aspects of product management. But in between Eloqua and Shomi, I started wondering, I was young and there were all these other career paths out there. Is product truly what I want to do for the rest of my life? So I had a very great opportunity at Destiny Solutions where I wore a ton of hats. I was a technical product manager, but I was also a solutions engineer. I was also a consultant. I was also a project manager. I was also doing documentation. You had to do everything. That has been a great experience that has allowed me to have, maybe not empathy, but be able to see other people's points of view a lot better in terms of those cross-functional teams. But it also solidified for me again, I want to build product. This is what I want to do. I want to build product. Those other roles are great. But for me, being able to understand the why, the challenges that are out there and honing in on, is this a real problem? Is this a real pain? Who am I trying to solve this for? And then seeing something translated in a product and users using it, that's what was really driving me back to the roles that were interesting. So I think for me, it was more of like, this curiosity of what else is out there, yet this hunger for continuing on in what I was doing. It was intimidating at times because there was a lot of transition going on in how you were accomplishing product, lean and agile, and transitioning from waterfall to agile methodologies were somewhat intimidating, especially with, seeing how certain companies were doing things, certain friends and colleagues were doing things versus the way your organization was. Am I doing this right? Am I imposter syndrome? Am I really a real product manager? Because that's what they say you should be doing over there, but we're not doing that. So I went through a lot of that kind of breaking it down and going, is this truly what I want? And I have to still say I'm still here today, and product is still truly what I love to do.
That's great. That's great. And you now qualify as a product leader. So
yes,
that's awesome.
yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
But now you've been through, an interesting, sort of transition period or evolutionary period for the profession, just like I have. You sort of started, back before such agile and lean methodologies were popular anyway. And so you've seen that transition, which in turn has really affected the way we think about product management too, right? It's, old days used to be, write 100-page requirements and throw it over the wall at the development team and pray to God it was going to come out well.
Exactly.
So thank goodness that has all changed. I totally agree with you. Yeah, that's neat. So when you were at WorkBrain, that was like David Ossip time?
That was David Ossip times, yes,
okay.
exactly.
And how formalized was the product team at that point? Like it was...
I'm going to struggle to remember the actual numbers, but I was on there were only 2 product analysts and probably about 5 or 6 product managers. I happened in on a brand new product, and that kind of sparked my brand new product love and passion. And through a bit of honest circumstance, inherited owning products very early in my journey there, mainly because I was a subject matter expert as a product analyst, and my 2 product managers went on maternity leave. So there's a little bit of things happened in the right way. And I got an opportunity to really help build out at the time, the healthcare product suite. So it was a larger team, but we had very much waterfall processes, right? Exactly what you said, big MRD, big PRD, getting the requirements, big long deliverables. And then as I got closer to leaving is when we were starting to transition into lean and really break down our processes.
Nice. Yeah, that's interesting. You've been through a number of interesting different environments, which we'll get to as we talk about this. But let's talk about mentors and mentorship. That's our topic today. And so in those early steps, did you have a mentor or mentors?
Absolutely.
Can you tell us about one of them? How did it work, and what kind of things did you learn?
Yeah, I have been very lucky to have a mentor for a good portion of my career, and still do, I would say, today. I'll first say that there's what I refer to as explicit mentor, where will you be my mentor? Yes, I'm your mentor. And there's a mentor-mentee relationship versus people you almost just get attached to or go seek advice from. And I say that in every walk of my life, I tend to find people who I want to learn from and grow from. So in terms of explicit mentors, they were in my early part of my career. They were my managers. They were people that I looked up to, that I reported into, that were guiding me on how to do my job better. And I think that kind of carried on throughout. I'll tell I guess it's not as embarrassing now because I'm so far through my career, but I remember my first 3 months at WorkBrain. I had 2 managers at the time, which is always very interesting, but I kind of had a direct manager and someone who was, again, acting in a mentor capacity. And transitioning into the software world, I wasn't doing a good job. I kind of felt it. I felt like I wasn't excelling in the way that I traditionally excel. And a month and a half in, I scheduled a meeting with them and I said, I don't think I'm doing a good job. And they said, we don't think you're doing a good job either. And it was a fantastic moment in the sense of they were a little bit more clear with their expectations, and I was way more clear on what I needed to actually hit those expectations. And since that moment, that turning point, things changed very dramatically. And like I said, I ended up taking on multiple products and had a very great career at WorkBrain. But that was my first exposure to even just being not afraid to say, I don't get it, I'm struggling. And so for me, even though I had mentors who were my bosses, if they were my boss, I made sure that I could still be vulnerable with them, that I could still go to them and say, yes, you're, for lack of better words, assessing me on my performance, but I don't think performance should be something of, I don't get it. Right. That's something, me coming to you and asking for your guidance and help. And so those mentors were really great in the sense of being able to help me understand how to overcome my challenges, or giving me the tools to overcome my challenges.
Mm-hmm. Nice. That's awesome. And so, like me, you were so fortunate, and now in hindsight, grateful that those opportunities came up, and you just, for whatever reason, happened to, take those opportunities. Yeah, that's great. And so I'm really glad you mentioned the sort of explicit, mentorship versus less formalized, I guess. And I think, we're probably going to talk more about the kind of explicit mentorships, and like the programs we have at the TPMA or something like that you've participated in, where there is a structure and, sort of a process and all that kind of stuff. But talk to me about, one of your mentors that was not explicit, and like,
Sure.
how did you sort of, like get into that relationship? Did they realize that they were mentoring you, or, how did that work?
That's a really great question, because I don't know if I assume that they knew they were mentoring me because of the way that I approached the conversations. I had a couple in my last role at Intellytics, one who was actually a peer of mine who I learned a great deal from their point of view. Someone who is in the sales and marketing ecosystem and strategy ecosystem, who I just, they were definitely not an explicit mentor in the terms of product management sense, and they were a peer. But the way that I was able to go to them and seek their point of view and understand how they would approach a situation, which ultimately led into how I lead or how I make decisions, I would definitely consider them a mentor. The other would be my CEO at my last role, who I reported directly to. There were definitely aspects where I think he knew I saw him as a mentor. I told him later on, much later as we established the relationship, that I did. But it was more about the way that I approached questions with him in curiosity. Why'd you do that? How did you come to that decision? Were there things that you looked out for? And I noticed the more I asked those questions, the more they were fed to me without always having to ask, which was also really great.
Mm-hmm.
I had the luxury of actually speaking with one of my mentors at one of the sessions that you hosted as well. And Thibaut was a fantastic mentor who I got to work for twice. So I've been very fortunate to find people who I sought a skill that they had, or a technique they had, or a chilled vibe that they had in some cases, and thought, they know a secret, and I want to learn that secret, because maybe it'll be useful for the way that I lead or I do what I do. Maybe it won't, but what's the harm in learning more?
Nice. That's cool. Yeah, I haven't. That's the first time I've heard of sort of somebody thinking of a peer relationship, even though it's a learning relationship and a sharing relationship, as a sort of mentorship. But you're right. It's, we usually think of it as sort of big gaps in experience, but, it can also be more horizontal and really different perspectives too. And maybe there's a different word for that. I'm not sure, but
possibly.
mentorship
I
works
think,
right now. Yeah.
I think when you look at, the way I look at mentorship often is do they have the experience in something that I don't have that they can give me? And in some cases, our peers will have more experience and can actually guide us and teach us. And it in particular, it was the way he managed his teams and the way that he, there was a few different things, but you're right. It's not definitely not the traditional sense of mentorship, but I would say that when I've been the most open to learning and being guided by anyone, regardless of what position they're in, and that includes my mentees, there's almost sometimes like that reverse feeling with your mentees where I'm learning from them as much as they're learning from me. So I guess I have a very fluid view on that definition.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, no, that's cool. And definitely we're going to talk about the other
Yeah.
side of the role
Yeah.
for sure. But yeah, that's so. So I think, yeah, we learn in a lot of different ways, and you know what you're highlighting is something I always tell product people who want to get into product. You know, what makes a great product manager, and it comes down to one thing: curiosity, right? And being willing, as you said, to be open and vulnerable, and have empathy, and go seek understanding of things that you may not know about, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's cool. Welcome to everybody who's on the call here. We're having on, at Product AMA, and I'm talking to Rina Whittaker about mentorship. And as you probably know already, you can ask your questions in the Zoom chat. So please get your questions in there for Rina, and we'll get to them as we move on here. But Rina, so let's talk about from a mentee's perspective, and maybe this is in a more explicit type of relationship. From a mentee's perspective, what are the key elements for a successful relationship with a mentor? What are the most important things for a mentee?
Absolutely. I think the first, and I kind of touched on it with how I talked about being a mentee as well as looking for a mentor, is vulnerability. And it's the idea of engaging a relationship with a mentor with your defenses down. So coming in with this, I don't know, I would like to learn, versus a sense of I'm trying to prove myself. I've been in the latter where I wanted to prove myself to a mentor, and you just don't learn from them. You end up either not asking the questions that you want to ask, or just falsely saying, yeah, okay, got it, and then not really taking anything away. So I think, again, it comes back to an openness and a true curiosity, and a humbleness of like, okay, I don't have all the answers, and I'm really truly here. I'm expecting you not to judge me on the questions I'm asking. So I want to learn from you. The other is preparedness, knowing what you want to know. And that might be, not specifically like I want to know how to, suddenly I blanked. I don't, it doesn't have to be so specific, versus what do I want to get out of this relationship? What do I want to, where do I want to be better in my career or in my skills within product management? So there's an element of preparedness that I think is necessary. Otherwise, I don't know how to guide someone if they don't know what they need from me. I can try to figure it out, but then that becomes, a very different type of relationship in a sense. So I would say those two are the biggest.
Yeah, that's great. And that is, as you've experienced, that is one of the things that we discovered in the mentorship program at TPMA that was sort of an ingredient, a success factor, was that the mentee needs to prepare ahead of time the kinds of questions that they want to talk about, right? Mm-hmm. And as opposed to expecting the mentor to teach them something or to figure out what they need to know. As a basis, that's great. But sometimes, you don't know what you don't know, right? Yeah. And so, I've had really interesting discussions with mentees about just an area that they're curious about, but don't really know how to think about it or to, find out more or that kind of thing. And so there's a room for both, right?
100%. And that's kind of, I suppose, what I meant by it doesn't have to be specific, but it could be very much, I'm interested in how to define value proposition better. I'm not quite sure I understand okay, great. Let's talk about that. how do we approach that? Or, agreed that I think those are some of the most fun conversations and where I probably, anyone who talks to me knows that I can start to ramble on a little bit more because I get so excited about new concepts and ideas.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Nice. That's great. Okay. So those are sort of some of the key elements for a mentee. When you were a mentee, what did you learn that has now helped you to be a better mentor?
Yeah. The number one thing was that you can learn without mimicking. And that just because I'm learning from someone doesn't mean that I have to apply what I've learned in the exact same way that they do it. In fact, that's probably not going to feel natural to me. So for me, it was very much, and because I found myself doing that, I admire this person's ability to do X, so I'm going to embody them, versus I admire their ability to do X, so therefore I'm going to figure out how to do it my style. And so as I look at, my mentees, I look at, okay, I want them to learn the concept and how to apply the concept, but they don't have to do it the way I do it. In fact, they may find a way that may change the way I would do something. So that one has stuck with me very much, and actually stuck with me outside of my career and into my life as well, with my children in a variety of different ways.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's there's a sort of delicate balance between kind of leading somebody through the thinking process so that they're learning by actually doing it,
Yes.
right? And so they understand the kind of journey, but that you're not telling them the answer, or that has to be done a specific way,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the magic, right? Is because a mentee that's just expecting the mentor to tell them this is the answer is not all that productive, right? It's got to be kind of holding their hand through the thinking process and teaching them how to think about it, right? Think critically, in a lot of respects. So that's interesting. So now we're getting a couple of questions, but I want to ask you one more thing before we turn to those. You've had some, years of experience now as a mentor. So the thing that mentees always want to know is, why do mentors do this? What's in it for them? And then tell me if there have been sort of any unexpected surprises in your interactions with mentees.
For sure. Initially being a mentor was part of the role. As you become a product leader, you mentor people on your team, especially at the small organizations that I worked with, the startups, the growth stage companies, where you're not necessarily hiring a ton of people with a lot of experience. Many people on my teams were new to product management, but then I found that it's actually made me a better product leader. Being able to take concepts that there's so much theory out there in terms of how to do product management, but being able to apply that theory in the worlds that do not reflect the ideal cases, the ideal scenarios. Things are not set up to work the way that all the frameworks and best practices necessarily want or are kind of intended for things to operate in. So that's kind of exciting for me, is like being able to, how do I explain this concept where no, we don't do things yet in this way that would really allow us to excel as a product person. But part of the journey is getting there and seeing those the light bulb turn on for my team and or anyone that I'm mentoring, and at some point feel like they've surpassed me in their ability to build product and the ability then to lead as well. I find I get more, I'm getting more back from that now than I am now from building products, because I've built a lot of products. I've been at a lot of companies. So seeing other people grow is really, as cliche as it sounds, rewarding.
For sure. And I think, I'll just add to that, my own perspective has always, and I learned this from a mentor that I had at a very early age when I, as a mentee, was that we need to think of our careers, but our lives too, right, as more than just our time on this planet, right? Yeah. We're part of a continuum, and if we feel like, we have a sort of more servant mentality, or service mentality, then, we want to make sure that the next generation is standing on our shoulders. We give them a boost so that they're learning things that, we may have discovered the hard way, and we want them to go further without having to, start all over again. And especially in product management, I've seen that change over, 20 years now. There's a big difference with a lot more people, a lot more product leaders who recognize that, and people start to see it as a profession that has longevity beyond my particular career,
That's such a great way. I love the way that you said that. Absolutely. That's fantastic. And in fact, that prompted the second question you asked me of surprises. One thing that surprised me is how many times I've seen myself in people that I'm mentoring in one way or another, and kind of just, smiled inwardly of like, I've been there. I so know how they're feeling right now. I know what they're going through. And I almost know how to get them to the other side, but they have to go through, part of it is their journey.
That's right.
But how can I maybe give them a shortcut to get to this?
Yeah, reduce the friction for sure. Yeah. But
exactly.
they, you still have to learn. And I mean, that's another interesting conversation we could have about, what's that fine balance between, learning the hard way versus, sort of being led through it. But so we're getting some really great questions here. And I think let's turn to a couple of them. One question here that's kind of interesting is, how can we show gratitude to our mentors? So if you're a mentee, I mean, we've just been talking about how mentors get a lot out of the relationship already, but are there any things that you've observed that really kind of are that little step up about the mentee showing that how much they really appreciate it?
Wow, that's a really great question. I don't think I've ever actually given that much thought, but I think, if you look at appreciation in general, externally, just even saying thank you, the knowledge you've given me, the time that you've spent with me has been valuable. For me, that's always nice when someone says thank you. That feels like the simplest appreciation. And then kind of echoing what you said earlier around how you view your career. If I impart something to you and you say thank you, and then you take that and you impart it to someone else and you carry it forward, maybe with you adding your knowledge, start to see you grow. I think for me, that's a form of appreciation and gratitude.
Yeah, for sure. That's very nicely said. I like that. Let's see. Talwar is asking, there are multiple product domains, of course. Should a specific domain like fintech or AI or machine learning be taught by a mentor, or is it more about exploration from the mentee's end?
That's a great question. Speaks to me very directly because I have been in a different industry in every one of my careers, my positions. So I think there are different types of mentors. There is a subject matter mentor who can help guide you in a field and help you understand the industry and excel in that industry. But then there is the practice of product management. And my whole career has been built on the concepts around product management being translatable industry to industry. So it'd be a bit weird for me to say you can only learn from one person since that's kind of my career. But I think there's room for multiple types of mentors. One that helps guide you in applying best practice around product management, and the other that helps you understand the specific industry and where that may be going, and in guiding and freshening up your knowledge there.
And there's even, I would even add a third layer to that, which is observing and learning how to think critically through problem solving, right?
Yes.
And that's, that's a life skill that we all need, right? But there are people that are particularly good at that. And what I love in the whole profession over the last, generation or two is that we've really shifted to a problem solving kind of focus instead of building features, right? And I think that's just so magical for you know, not just the profession, but all the tech companies we work with, right? It just makes such a more effective approach to product and value.
I think that's the thing that has probably excited me the most about the product management over the last, you know, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, has been the impact that product management has on an organization as a whole, and how it starts to change how everyone thinks within an organization versus just, you know, this group of people who are telling people what to code, right? That's how people used to think about it. Now it is a culture, it is a mindset, and there's more respect for the impact it has to an overall organization that I think is exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question here, Vishal is asking, I'm managing PMs and trying to mentor them to grow, and there are a few that don't really ask questions or identify areas they want to improve in.
Mm-hmm.
How do you, or would you enable them to open up so that I can help them to develop?
Great question. I think there's always going to be, in no matter what role and no matter what industry, there's going to be people who struggle with being proactive. It's a bit more challenging under the product space because it's part of your role is to kind of lean forward. But I think trying to have those one-on-one conversations and breaking down some barriers around what is it that you don't know the questions to ask, or kind of going to what you said earlier, or what's expected of you in your role. And so you're not sure how what you're doing fits into what's expected of you. Trying to engage in that dialogue incrementally as often as possible. I think the unfortunate part, or the reality, is that there will be some people who aren't open for whatever reason is to mentorship. And so also recognizing that you can't throw mentorship at someone and shove it down their throat and say, I'm going to mentor you, versus see if you can tease them to being open to a little bit at a time. I just want to guide you. Maybe it's just this one piece. And if you find that they're open to that, let's move on that one piece. So mentoring when you're also managing someone is another twist, because if you need to mentor them because they're not doing their role, if they're not doing their job right, then that has to actually be an open, frank conversation around, these are areas where you're struggling, and my job is to help you not struggle with them. So what can I do to help you not struggle? What tools can I give you? And that type of thing.
Right. I wonder if, you know, in that particular situation, what you just mentioned, where you're a person's manager and potentially a mentor, whether that's actually more of a coach kind of relationship. And what do you think about that? Like, how do you see the difference between a coach and a mentor? Or coaching as an activity, you know? Yeah,
that's a really great question. I think I don't know if I have the answer for that one right now. I'm going to have to noodle that one a bit.
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe, you know, I'm sure if Mark was in the conversation, he'd have a sports metaphor for it.
Sure. Yeah. That's immediately where I went, as I went to sports and tried to think of, is it a general manager versus the coach?
That's right. Yeah. Harmon has another interesting question. He's asking, how do you schedule periodic catch-ups with your mentors or mentees at a defined frequency, or do you keep meetings more spontaneous based on the needs and challenges that you're facing?
Both. I think it's important to do both. Having those touch points, and I would be lying if I said that I had them all scheduled up all the time, but it's important to have those purposeful checkpoints and direct conversations, planned conversations, as frequently as you can have them, whatever cadence that is, but then also having the openness to say, when you have a situation, I'm here to talk through something, because you know, the hardest, the ones that often you find the best reward from, both from a mentee and a mentor, those conversations are often the variable conversations where they just come up and I need some advice on this, or I don't know how to do this, or I have a presentation tomorrow and I'm really freaked out about it, or something like that, right?
Right. Yeah, there's My friend Rick Wolf, who I do sort of leadership roundtables with, is an expert at facilitating conversations, and he has really interesting, sort of proverbs, if you will, or almost, that conversations are actually a series of misunderstandings.
Yes.
So you need to have a conversation to start to understand each other, right? And so the way to come at it is with an important question that you're really passionate about finding an answer to, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's, back to what you were just saying, that if you can, if you can find a question that is urgent or important that I really need to figure out, that's an additional driver and motivator to it.
Yes,
So
exactly.
yes, as a good mentor, you want to be open to that as much as possible, for sure. And turn it into a teaching opportunity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. That's the great. So so keep the questions coming. They're great. Let's see. Oh, Bonnie has a good one here. She's asking, at what point of your career did you notice you're switching from being a mentee to a mentor? And was that sort of a natural shift based on your role or position in a company, or was it something that happened gradually based on people that crossed paths with your career?
So great question. I think one that I'm, working through right now in my head, it kind of goes back to the type of mentor, explicit mentor versus implicit mentor. And I think the implicit side came out as I started to help guide a company and show me in particular through a transformation around how product management, the principles of product management can impact an organization. And so I think, that's where it probably first started to play out, where I started to be interested in mentoring. And that it wasn't even product necessarily. In other words, like product managers versus people who are interested in the concepts. And I started to get excited about, oh, you're interested in this concept? Absolutely. I will happily talk about this and help figure out how it applies to what you're doing. So that's what I think what seeded the excitement. And then there's been ups and downs in terms of, having the right time and the ability to be an effective mentor. I know I've also been an ineffective mentor. That's something that I will own because I haven't had the time to actually give it what it needed to. So there's a bit of a combination of my own curiosity around the what I found interesting in it, and then having the opportunity to be a mentor.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and I get that's interesting sort of connection to the explicit implicit too, which is because if you're being an implicit mentor, you may not realize it, and so you have to still approach it with empathy and a little bit of patience and time, because otherwise it doesn't work, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. Have you in any of the companies you've worked with, has there been sort of a formal mentorship program?
Not formal. No, there's typically been a, hey, I want to learn more from you, type of situation. But small organizations, typically where I've come from, they don't have that formal mentor program.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So what do you enjoy most about mentoring?
Oh, I feel like I've said a lot of that already, but I think it really is hearing myself talk. No, it's explaining a concept and seeing how someone takes it, applies it to their own world, breaks it down, learning through their eyes in a sense. It's really, I guess there's an element too of, I may have done something multiple times, but can I explain it in a way that's going to allow you to take it and apply it? And so when I see something we've talked about, when I've helped someone through a situation that I know I've been in, or maybe I haven't been in, but they're in it and I'm helping them through it, it's this feeling of accomplishment that in some sense I almost don't get in other aspects of my career, because I've done so many things often. They're new accomplishments. Now I'm accomplishing something by seeing this person grow. And it's rewarding in its own way. And it's a true test to me in terms of whether I really understand some of the principles and practices that are at the core of product.
Right, right. As you know, we've always heard that you don't really know something until you have to teach it to somebody else,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
But I think in mentorship that, you know, that's not about the answer or getting to the right answer. It's about how you think through it, right? And so my next question is about, you know, like, think of one of those conversations, like a really good one that you've had with a mentee, and the mentee comes to you with a question. But it's clear that they're looking for an answer.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like, okay, I have to do this presentation tomorrow and I need to know this, right?
Sure.
How do you handle that?
So I don't give the answer. I'll give you an example of a monthly product report card that I had put together or had my team put together at one point. And, you know, it was the first monthly product report card, and the product manager asked me, well, what do I put on it? Well, what's important? And so my answer was, well, who's our audience? Let's talk about who our audience is. Okay. What do you think that audience would want to know? Because you're right, I can give the answer, but, and I'm guilty of that, as I think everyone is, of, okay, shortcut, I'll give them the answer and then I'll explain how I got to it. But in that situation, it was, you know, I tried to, let's just talk it out and see if we can help them get to that point, to their own answer. And in cases, it couldn't be a better answer than the one that I may have given them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think, I mean, that's what constantly surprises me, you know, in my interactions with mentees is that I'm continually learning from them because they have a different perspective. You know, they want to learn from my experience, but, you know, when they ask me, you know, oh, how did you do that? You know, I have to stop for a second and, just like you're saying, and say, okay, I could tell them how I did that, but I really need to qualify it by saying that's not necessarily how you should do it, right? Yeah. So.
And this is where I think it's interesting when you blend mentorship, back to your earlier question around coaching, mentorship along with managing. There's a different balance between, well, if I'm managing, then I am coaching. I have to run the plays. I kind of have to give a little bit more direction on how I want to see things, or what play we're going to run. But when I'm a mentor, well, I'm really just here to answer your questions and be there for you to help explore something versus, you know, guide you on exactly how to do it.
Yeah, actually, that's a really interesting point, because maybe the difference is that a mentor doesn't necessarily have a vested interest in the outcome.
Yeah.
Right. Other than
the
person succeed. Right.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So it's about the person, not necessarily the outcome.
Yeah. Not to say that I don't think you can find, because I know I myself have had great mentors who I've reported into. But I think I'm seeing that distinction more now that, you know, with the coach versus.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Hey, I love it. We're learning from each other.
Exactly.
So keep the questions coming, you guys. There's some great questions there, and if any of the rest of you have questions for Rina, please get them in the chat, and we'll get to them. I want to briefly talk about, and maybe you can give a specific example. Like, can you think of a time when, you know, that conversation with a mentee or a mentor maybe has been a real challenge, and how did you manage it? Like, what did you do with it? Maybe it was a personality conflict, or maybe something else. I'm not sure, but
yeah. I'll use mentor, because I think it's probably the less obvious one. But it was a point where I think I had outgrown my mentor in some sense. You know, I had learned what I could from them, but was trying to learn more. Because I respect them so much that I wanted to learn more, and I didn't want to necessarily go seek another mentor, but it would just started creating friction in the relationship. And so I think it was an interesting moment for me to say, okay, I can say that this person has been a great mentor. I've learned from them. I've grown from them tremendously, but that doesn't mean that I can only learn from them, or now it's time for me to find someone else who can mentor me in a different avenue, in a different area. So I think that's what came to mind when you asked that question.
Yeah, that transition could be challenging to recognize when it's no longer serving you well, or not that you don't appreciate it, but it's just like, as you said, you've sort of moved on, and you need something different that you want to find somebody else who has that quality or something. Yeah.
And it's interesting in that particular example, because I went back to that mentor and after that realization years later with questions, but it was just like I had to fly away for a bit and come back. So
interesting. Well, I'll tell you a very short but interesting story on that. So I actually, when I was about 16, I had a kind of business. Actually, he was my first boss, but I didn't work for him very long. And after that, we became really good friends. And he was kind of a business mentor for me through my whole career. And then at a certain point, of course, he retired, and he was, aging and elderly. And we still had talks, periodically, but I could tell there was a point at which it started to shift from him being my mentor to me being his mentor. Which was really interesting because, he was getting a little bit of dementia, but he still wanted to understand what was going on in technology and how people were thinking and stuff like that. So it was really fascinating.
That is interesting.
On that dynamic. And I think that might've been quite unusual, because we don't often have, a relationship like that through most of our career. Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So anyway, just an anecdote.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that.
Anka has an interesting question asking, do you agree that organizations large or small should have a mentorship program from a career development perspective? Like, for example, some of the large banks do have some of those programs. What are there, in your mind, benefits to formalizing that?
I think so. I think having a vehicle to say, I'm here to be a mentor, and pairing people up is very valuable. I think when people start doing it because it's solely part of a process, though, it detracts from the reason or the value you can get out of it. I think it's probably all, like many things, how it's implemented and how it's rolled out. Is it a voluntary system, or is it like, well, you're in this role and now you must be a mentor? And because I have heard of that before as well, right? So I think there's always an opportunity. I think there's probably many people out there who don't know how to get a mentor or to be a mentor.
Yeah, well, we'll come around to that in a second, because we have a little bit of time left for one or two more questions. But and the last one I wanted to talk to you is about, those books and resources and stuff like that. How do you learn? But the other question I had was around oh man, sorry. This is a problem with getting older,
Been there. I've been there, yes.
Anyway, so while I think of that, Manish, thank you for saving me. Manish has a question. What is the best piece of advice you have received from a mentor, and what was the best piece of advice you give to mentees?
Oh, yeah, that's one I'm gonna have to sit and think about for a moment. I've just had so many pieces of great advice. I think in product management wise, I'll start with the advice that I'll give because there's so many of the ones that I've been given. The one that I would give is, there's a lot of theory out there, and there's a lot of practice, and there's a lot of so-called idealized perfection. And I think if you try to live your bar towards that perfect ideal idea of what a product manager is and does, it sets yourself up for failure. So figure out, how to incrementally improve. It's like building a product. You don't just aim for this perfect thing here. It's an incremental journey, and it's your own journey. So figuring out how you can take concepts and ideas and change your thinking and add to your toolbox to incrementally improve you'll actually end up at a place a lot faster than if you are just waiting for all of the, everything to line up and things to be perfect and comparing yourself to the quote unquote perfect product managers, the product people who are fictitious. There's no perfect product person, no perfect product company, no perfect organization.
Except for superhuman. That's
yeah.
but no.
So be forgiving in the fact that you may make mistakes and you may not do things the best. And actually, that is probably the best piece of advice I was given is you don't have to be perfect. You're not going to build a perfect product. You're not going to be a perfect product manager. You're not going to, there's perfection will be your downfall. So stop looking for perfection and look for doing the best you can and to learn and like continued learning.
Right. If we're perfect, we don't learn much, right? No. So, so in fact, the paradox is it is good to make mistakes. Just don't make the same ones again.
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
That's good. Well, we're just about out of time. But I wanted to ask you, like you've probably been a mentor of women product managers and men product managers. Have you handled them differently, or can you tell us a little bit about that, maybe?
Yeah, I think I'm as a female, I am more in tune with the gender challenges that exist in organizations, and as a minority, those things minority female tend to I'm attuned to them, but I try to approach my mentorship and just my relationship style with who is the other person on the other end. And kind of like presenting 101, know your audience, and how am I going to connect with you versus with the other person. No two people are alike, so what worked with this person isn't going to work with that person. And the only way that gender really pops in is maybe recognizing some of the biases that have existed, which thankfully are significantly better than when I first started my career, but still exist. But yeah, otherwise it's really much more about who's the other person on the other end and how do I create a connection with them.
Yeah, that's great. The other question I wanted to ask you is related to what I see as the biggest challenge facing our profession right now. And that's that there's a high demand for product managers, and specifically experienced product managers, but there's very little supply or not enough supply. So kind of when you think about the community and a profession and maybe mentors, for sure, they're a part of that. Do you have any thoughts about how we can get people into the profession and get them the kind of important initial experience that they can start adding value and learning, the way we'd like to see it? That to me is the biggest challenge we're facing right now.
Yeah, I think we have to recognize and be open to hiring people who don't have the experience. And I've been forced to do that many times because of the small organizations sometimes that I have worked for, but being open to, does this role require someone with 10 years of experience, 7 years of experience, or does someone with the curiosity, the knowledge, can they come in and do a product analyst role and learn whether they like it too? Because another piece of advice I give, I'm going to backtrack a little bit and say another piece of advice that I give to both mentees and anyone I manage under product is it is probably the least forgiving role I have ever experienced. Someone is always mad at you. You're always being punched in some way, shape, or another. And rarely do you get a thank you in terms of building of what you do. So part of it is also allowing people an opportunity to understand what product is beyond the glorious view of what people think it is. Everyone thinks it's this role that gets all this power and all this responsibility without all of the challenges. So being open to hiring people with less experience and pairing them with people who do have experience, I think is valuable and the most important. More people who are in our positions who have the experience, I think if we become more open to guiding instead of doing, I think that's important as well.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and I just as an aside, Bonnie, who is still on the call, maybe, yeah, Bonnie's, I think it's, no, maybe that's not, I'm not sure if that's the same Bonnie, but anyway, we've been working with the Schulich MBA school on starting to set up some internships.
Beautiful. That's
and so,
fantastic.
just spread the word that if there are companies out there that, are willing to, sort of help somebody get a leg up, but also somebody who's smart and can add value pretty quickly, that there are ways to do that. So anyway, keep open to it. So one last question, and that's the one about resources. Have you run into any resources, books, or other things that have been useful at helping you to kind of understand how this works well?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, actually, let me first say, I immediately went into not mentorship, but product management. So I should probably ask a clarifying question here of, as I think about that, I'm thinking about it more from the lens of product management and what product management is versus how to be a mentor. So there's of course, the usual, the Dan Olsons, the Chip and Dan Heath books. They're all great. They're fantastic. But I find a lot of free content out there in terms of Product Plan, which is actually a software. They have a ton of great webinars and content that they put out that I find very great digestible chunks of information. So I use their material quite a lot. They probably see my name registered in every company that I'm at, but I love their content. I'm still a big fan of the pragmatic framework. I know that it's been, I won't even say how many years since I've taken it, and I don't know how they've altered their courses based on the agile model, but from an understanding of all of the aspects of what product is, I think their framework is fantastic.
Yeah, I was thinking, I'm curious about the mentoring side, like
okay.
whether, there are books and experts in sort of mentoring, but is there anybody in maybe product management circles that, that you kind of follow, that kind of thinks like a mentor or something like that?
Oh, I don't. Yeah, I clearly thought about that question wrong. I went straight into mentoring versus no. I mean, I think there are people out there that I follow because they are mentors, but they're not even necessarily in the industry. They're maybe of different industries. I think I look at how do people convey messages? Who am I following, whether it's on social media, whether it's articles that I read on a frequent basis, and what they're saying is resonating with me. And is that how, is it their method of connection? Is that something that I can take away? And then, of course, learning from all my mentors that I've had, what's worked, what hasn't, and I've seen them mentor other people as well. What was different about it. So
yeah, I'm not sure you could write a book on it because it's all about the experience, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we're going to wrap up because it's 4:00, but Rina, thank you so much for taking the time to join us and for sharing your insights and experience and learning. It's really been a pleasure to talk to you.
Thanks for having me, Lee.
Thanks, Rina.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Follow Product AMA on Twitter and send us your topic suggestions. We look forward to seeing you soon.